The cruiser stopped so fast the tires screamed. Officer Declan Callahan jumped out, rain spattering his uniform, and shouted, "Move your damn self off that bench!" The old man didn't flinch. He just looked up, calm. Cigar glowing faintly under the streetlight. "I'm waiting for my granddaughter." Declan's jaw tightened. "You think I care? You don't belong here." He kicked the bench hard. The man's cane fell. His head struck the curb with a dull crack. Blood spread into the gutter. Sergeant Raina Boudreau froze. "Dec, stop!" she cried. "He's hurt!" Declan yanked the man upright, cuffs snapping shut around his wrists. Resisting arrest, he hissed, should have known better. The man's voice was quiet, steady through the blood. "Son, you've just ended your career." Declan sneered. "Yeah? We'll see about that." He dragged the old man toward the cruiser while tourists stared, phones raised, thunder rolling above Royal Street. That was the moment history shifted, an assault that would burn through every precinct in America. Before we dive into the story, where are you watching from? Please subscribe to the channel and give a like to support this story. Your engagement helps us bring more true-to-life stories like this one. Rain kept falling as the cruiser sped toward the 8th District Precinct, wipers screeching across the glass. Raina sat silent in the passenger seat, her pulse pounding. She had seen bad arrests, but never one that felt like a curse. In the back. The old man sat perfectly straight, hands cuffed, blood drying on his temple. No pleading, no anger, just silence that made Declan's chest tighten. He muttered, "Old fool thought he could talk down to me." Raina glanced at the mirror. "Dec, something's off." He didn't look scared. "He's nobody." Declan snapped. "Some drunk who thinks he's special." But when Raina picked up the wallet that had fallen between the seats, her breath caught. "Justice Elijah Moreau, retired Supreme Court of the United States." Her hands trembled. "Dec," she whispered. "This man's a federal judge." Declan snatched the ID, ripped it in half, and tossed it onto the floorboard. "Fake. Ain't no Supreme Court judge sitting in the rain on Royal Street." Raina looked out the window, rain streaking down the glass, deep down. She knew they had just crossed a line they couldn't return from. By the time they reached the precinct, thunder rolled like cannon fire over the French Quarter. Declan dragged Elijah through the doorway, shoving him into a metal chair in the holding room. "You'll sit here till I say otherwise." Elijah met his eyes, calm as stone. "I warned you, Officer Callahan. Every choice has its price." Declan stepped closer, voice shaking. "You think you can scare me?" "No," Elijah said softly. "I'll let justice do that." Raina turned away, pressing her hand to her stomach. She'd carried guilt for years, covering up cases, staying quiet after her own assault in that same building. But something about Elijah's voice stirred something in her. It wasn't just authority. It was grace wrapped in pain. She whispered to the desk sergeant, "We need to log him in." The sergeant, O'Malley, squinted at the blood on Elijah's shirt. "Loitering? At this hour?" Declan barked. "Write it up." O'Malley hesitated, typing slow. "You sure this is how you want to play it?" "Dec, you heard me," Declan said. "Do your job." Elijah sat quietly, the ticking of the clock echoing through the stale air, the mold smell mixed with the faint hum of broken fluorescent lights. He closed his eyes and thought of his granddaughter, Dr. Amélie Moreau, still in surgery at Tulane, 8 blocks away. She was saving a 12-year-old boy. Here, her grandfather's blood-stained police concrete. He almost smiled at the irony. He'd spent a lifetime teaching that justice begins with patience, and now patience would bring justice to him. Declan paced, sweat running down his neck. "Old man? Who the hell are you?" Elijah finally spoke. "The man who wrote the law that protects your right to ask that question?" Declan slammed the table, eyes wild. You think I won't put you in the dirt? Elijah stared straight through him. You already have, and now the country will see? Declan turned away, voice shaking. You don't know who you're dealing with? Elijah whispered. Neither do you. In the hallway. Raina turned her body cam on, angling it just enough to capture the scene. She didn't know why. Maybe instinct, maybe redemption, but something in her told her this would matter. Deck, she said softly. You should call it a night. Not till I'm done. He growled. The lights flickered, one bulb dying overhead. It felt like the whole room exhaled. Elijah looked up toward the ceiling and said quietly, I once sat on the highest bench in this nation. Tonight, I sit on the last one. Raina froze at those words. The old man wasn't broken. He was waiting for something larger than all of them. Outside, a low rumble built through the storm. The city was about to awaken. Within hours, federal lines would light up, servers would crash, and the 8th District would crumble under the weight of its own corruption. But for now, in that small, dim room, only 3 souls knew what had begun. One fueled by rage, one by guilt, and one by unshakable purpose. Elijah sat there, cuffed, bleeding, but unbowed. His voice was steady, almost prayerful. Justice doesn't sleep. Son, it waits. And tonight, it woke up. The cruiser screeched to a stop behind the rusted gate of the 8th District precinct. Declan shoved the door open, rain pouring off his cap, dragging Elijah out by the cuffs. The old man stumbled, his knees hitting the pavement. But he didn't groan. He straightened himself, eyes calm, like someone who'd already seen this scene 100 times before. Inside, the building smelled of mildew, coffee, and rot. The walls sweated under flickering lights, and the sound of dripping water echoed through the hallway like a metronome marking the end of patience. Declan pushed Elijah into a metal chair, locking the cuff to a ring in the table. Sit tight. Old man, he spat. You'll be processed when I'm ready. Elijah looked up. Steady. You're already out of time. That quiet, confident tone made Declan twitch. He'd spent years hearing screams, denials, excuses, but never prophecy. Raina stood in the corner, her uniform soaked, hair plastered to her forehead. She watched the old man's blood drip onto the concrete, dark red against gray. Something in her wanted to step forward, to hand him a towel, but her own fear of reprisal chained her tighter than those cuffs. Declan stormed out to the hallway, muttering to O'Malley at the desk, Name him John Doe, charged with loitering. O'Malley raised a brow. You sure? He's dressed clean, looks educated. Declan glared. You taking notes for internal affairs now? O'Malley shrugged. Just saying. Deck, we don't need another complaint. The feds are sniffing around since that shooting last year. Declan leaned close, his breath sour with caffeine and pills. You do what I say. When he turned back, Elijah's voice carried through the hall, calm as a hymn. Officer Callahan, your father taught me law enforcement had 2 pillars, duty and restraint. Shame he raised one who learned neither. Declan froze mid-step. His father's name had never left his lips that night, yet the old man said it like a teacher reading a file. He spun, slammed the door open, grabbed Elijah by the collar. You don't talk about my father. Elijah's tone didn't rise. He was a good man. You lost him the day you chose rage over honor. Declan shoved him back into the chair, face inches away, eyes wild. You think you know me? You don't know a damn thing, Elijah whispered. I know you've been living with the ghosts of that school shooting. The boy who died in your arms still wakes you. Declan froze, breath catching, color draining from his face. How do you know that? Elijah looked down at the table, his blood pooling near the chain. Because truth speaks, even in silence. The room went quiet except for the hum of the lights. Raina's eyes darted between them, the old trauma in her chest tightening. She'd seen officers crumble under guilt before, but never this fast. Declan backed away, trembling, and grabbed his phone. "You! Shut your mouth!" he barked, more to himself than to Elijah. He turned to O'Malley, desperate to anchor his authority. "No phone call." He waits. O'Malley hesitated. "Policy says one call. Deck, you want another IA file on your back?" Declan's jaw clenched. "Fine. One call. Then he's done." Elijah smiled faintly. Good choice. His fingers shook as he dialed a number he knew by heart, a number he hadn't used in years. On the other end. In Washington, D.C., Chief Justice Valeria Ortiz was reviewing a brief by lamplight when her phone buzzed. She almost ignored it, until she saw the caller ID, Elijah Moreau. She answered, voice soft with surprise. "Elijah?" "It's past midnight." His voice was calm, measured. "Val." They drew first blood. 8th District, New Orleans. 2 officers. "It's happening again." For a moment. She didn't speak. The memory flashed of 1995, when Elijah had saved her from expulsion at Harvard by proving a dean's forgery. She owed him everything. Her chair creaked as she stood. "Stay alive," she said. "Fifth Circuit, DOJ, Mace Delgado. I'll move the machine." Elijah nodded, silent, then hung up. Declan yanked the phone from his hand. "Who'd you call?" Elijah met his stare. "The woman who decides your next headline?" Declan's face twisted. "You think some friend can save you?" Elijah's reply was quiet but sharp. "She's not my friend. She's the Chief Justice of the United States." The room froze. Raina's jaw dropped. Even O'Malley stopped typing. "Chief Justice?" Declan forced a laugh. "You expect me to believe that? You'll see it on every screen by sunrise," Elijah said. Declan backed out of the room, panic flickering in his eyes. His chest tightened, that familiar pounding behind his temples. He stormed into the captain's office, where Harlan Graves sat behind a cluttered desk, bourbon glass half empty. "Captain, we've got a problem." The old man claims he's Supreme Court. Graves chuckled darkly. "Every drunk in this city thinks he's God when cuffs come out. You followed orders, right? Clear the street for the club crowd?" Declan nodded, though his voice faltered. "Yeah, but he called D.C. Graves waved him off. "Then we delete the record. O'Malley'll scrub it. He was never here." He leaned forward, eyes red. "You're not the first cop to crack an old skull. You won't be the last." Meanwhile, in the holding cell, Raina leaned against the wall, trying to steady her breath. She watched Elijah through the glass, despite the blood and exhaustion. He sat tall, almost regal. "You don't seem afraid," she said quietly. Elijah smiled faintly. "Fear is a luxury I left in 1987, when they shot me outside my own courtroom." "You were shot," she whispered. "Assassination attempt," he said softly. "They failed then." Something in Raina broke. For the first time in years, she saw not a suspect, but a mirror of her own pain. Then the lights went out. Every bulb, every screen, the entire precinct drowned in blackness. The hum of the servers died, and a faint blue glow flickered on O'Malley's monitor. Words scrolling fast across the screen. Federal seizure initiated. Declan ran out of Graves's office, shouting. "What the hell is this?" Graves cursed, reaching for the phone. Deadline, servers down, cameras down, power cut. O'Malley shouted. "It's like someone's inside the system." Raina stared at her body cam. It blinked once, then began uploading footage to a cloud link she didn't activate. The screen flashed a seal. Department of Justice Cyber Division, Emergency Audit. Declan's heart raced. "We're hacked." Graves slammed his desk. "No, We're finished. Outside. The rain hammered harder, and the faint echo of a siren approached. Not a local one, but federal. Elijah sat in the dark cell, a thin smile crossing his lips. The law moves slowly, he murmured. But when it rises, it crushes. Declan slammed his fist against the glass. What did you do? Elijah met his gaze with quiet certainty. I made a call. And as the precinct lights flickered back in emergency red, they all realized that one phone call had just cracked open the walls they thought were untouchable. At Tulane Medical Center, Dr. Amélie Moreau scrubbed out of her 5th hour of surgery, her hands trembling but steady enough to finish the final stitch. The 12-year-old boy she'd been saving was alive, but her mind was already elsewhere. Her phone buzzed again and again on the tray beside her. Unknown numbers, missed calls, messages from her cousin in Baton Rouge. Turn on the news. Something happened to your grandfather. She didn't believe it at first. Elijah Moreau didn't get in trouble. He was the law, even retired. But when she finally played the voicemail from an officer whispering through static, Dr. Moreau, he's been detained at the 8th District. Injured. Her stomach dropped. Without a word, she ripped off her gloves, threw on her coat, and sprinted into the rain. The night swallowed her heels as she ran through the quarter, headlights slicing through puddles, her white coat soaked and flapping like a flag of war. Inside the precinct, panic had replaced arrogance. Servers blinked out. Monitors flickered. The phone lines crackled with dead air. Graves stood in the middle of the chaos, bourbon still in hand, shouting at a dispatcher who'd long since stopped listening. "Reboot the damn system!" he yelled. "Get me IT! Now! Sir, every login's blocked." The dispatcher stammered. "Someone's in the network. Remote override. DOJ seal on the firewall." Graves froze, realizing the name Moreau wasn't just noise. He turned to Declan, who was pale and shaking. "You told me he was a nobody." Declan's voice cracked. "He said he called the Chief Justice." Graves scoffed. "Bull. He's bluffing." Just then, the static-ridden radio on his desk screeched. A voice cut through the noise. "Federal warrant incoming. New Orleans 8th District Precinct. Seizure order signed Ortiz. V." The glass slipped from Graves's hand, shattering on the floor. Before anyone could react, the front door burst open, wind and rain tearing in with Amélie. Her hair clung to her face, eyes burning with fury. "Where is he?" she shouted. The officers froze. They'd seen angry citizens before, but this was different. Controlled, educated, dangerous. "Doctor," O'Malley began, "you can't just—" "Where is my grandfather?" She cut him off. "Elijah Moreau! You're holding him!" Graves stepped forward, straightening his soaked uniform. "Ma'am, your grandfather was obstructing police operations. He's being processed." "Processed?" Her voice trembled with rage. "He's 78, bleeding, and you call it processing?" Graves frowned. "Defensive." "Ma'am, lower your voice." "Lower my voice?" she snapped. "You assaulted a Supreme Court justice and you want respect?" The entire room went silent. Even Declan stopped breathing. "What did you just say?" Graves asked. Amélie pulled out her phone, showing a federal ID image she kept for emergencies. "Justice Elijah Moreau, my grandfather. Every law student in America studied his rulings. You laid hands on him." Graves looked at Declan, whose lips barely moved. "She's lying," he muttered, but his eyes betrayed him. Amélie stepped closer, inches from the captain's chest. "You're finished. Every camera, every wire, every heartbeat in this building belongs to the Department of Justice right now." Graves laughed dryly, a desperate sound. "Lady, you've got no idea who you're talking to." "Oh, I know," she said. "You're the man who turned a slave jail into a precinct. The man who covered 12 killings and called them clean shots. I read your name in my grandfather's files, Captain Harlan Graves, Katrina's hero, the one who never stopped drowning," before he could reply. The heavy wooden doors slammed open again. Two SUVs screeched to a stop outside, floodlights cutting through the rain. Men in dark suits poured in, flashing badges. At the front was AUSA Marcus Mace Delgado, tall, square-jawed, his Marine bearing still visible under the federal coat. He held up a sealed document. "Captain Graves," he said flatly, "by order of the Department of Justice and Chief Justice Valeria Ortiz, this precinct is now federal property. All systems, files, and officers are subject to investigation." Graves stammered. You can't just storm my building." "I can," Mace said, "and I just did." Declan backed away slowly, sweat dripping down his neck. His fingers twitched toward his holster. But Mace caught it. "Don't," he warned. "This isn't that kind of night." Reyna stepped forward from the corner. Eyes down. "Mr. Delgado," she said quietly, "I have something you need to see." She slipped him a small flash drive. 47 videos, she whispered. "Abuse, assaults. One of them's tonight." Mace studied her, recognizing the exhaustion of someone who'd finally stopped running. "You ready to testify?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "I'm done being quiet." Graves turned on her, face red. "You little traitor, enough." Mace barked. Two agents stepped in, holding him back. Graves's hands shook. "You don't understand," he said, voice breaking. "I saved this city during Katrina. I did what I had to do." "You killed your conscience," Mace said. "Now you'll pay for it, in the cell." Elijah heard the commotion but didn't move. He sat with his hands folded, eyes closed, listening to the echo of boots and thunder. When the door opened, Amelie rushed in, dropping to her knees beside him. "Grandpa," she whispered, tears mixing with rain. "I'm here." He smiled faintly, touching her face. "You always arrive when the storm breaks." "They hurt you," she said, her voice trembling. "They bled you." Elijah shook his head. "No, child. They bled themselves." Mace entered behind her, nodding respectfully. "Justice Moreau. I'm AUSA Delgado. Chief Justice Ortiz ordered full federal seizure. You're safe now." Elijah's eyes met his. "No one's safe until the truth stands." "Then we'll make it stand," Mace said. In the hallway, Graves frantically dialed the governor's line, but the call returned dead. Every channel was cut, every server locked, every camera feed mirrored straight to D.C. The entire 8th District had become evidence. "You can't do this," he growled. Mace turned back, his voice cold. "We already did." As agents began collecting hard drives, Reyna guided them to a hidden locker behind the break room wall. "You'll want this," she said quietly. Inside were tapes, discs, and case files marked confidential, use of force. Graves lunged forward, shouting, "Don't touch that!" An agent grabbed his arm. "Captain Harlan Graves," Mace declared, "you are hereby detained under suspicion of obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, and conspiracy." Graves laughed bitterly, but there was no fight left. "You think this'll change anything? The system's too deep, too dirty." Mace met his gaze. "Maybe, but tonight, it's bleeding." As they led Graves away, Amelie helped Elijah stand. He moved slowly, but with dignity, his hand steady on her arm. Reporters were already gathering outside, their lenses flashing through the rain. Mace turned to them both. "We'll move him to Tulane for evaluation, then to the courthouse under federal protection." Elijah nodded. "No need to rush. The truth's already faster," before stepping out. Elijah paused at the holding room door and looked back. "Sergeant Boudreau," he said softly. Reyna looked up, startled. "Yes." "Sir?" "You did the right thing," he said. "Redemption doesn't erase the past, but it builds the future." She blinked back tears. "Thank you, Your Honor." Outside. The storm finally broke open. Rain hammered the streets. washing away the blood from the sidewalk, soaking the overturned bench. Cameras flashed, microphones thrust forward, questions shouted into the chaos. "Justice Moreau, were you assaulted? What will happen to the officers?" Elijah didn't answer. He simply looked up at the gray sky, water streaming down his face, and said quietly, "Tonight, the heavens are testifying." Inside, Mace turned to his agents. "Lock this place down. No one leaves. No data leaves." His phone buzzed. A direct message from Chief Justice Ortiz. "Proceed. The storm begins now." It was 2:30 in the morning when the precinct finally fell silent. The kind of silence that follows after a hurricane tears through and leaves everything broken but still standing. The fluorescent lights buzzed above the interrogation room where Sergeant Reyna Boudreau sat across from AUSA Marcus Delgado, her hands trembling as she slid a small black flash drive across the metal table. 47 videos, she whispered, body cams, dash cams, even my own, they buried them all. My rape in 2019. Callahan's school shooting in 2022. Graves' 12 kills he called justified. Mace studied her, his face calm but his jaw tight. "Why give it now?" Reyna's eyes glistened. "Because I'm tired of seeing mothers bury sons while captains drink to promotions." He nodded. "You testify. You get immunity and protection for your daughter." Her voice cracked. "Just keep her away from this place." Outside the room, 2 federal agents escorted Declan Callahan down the hallway in cuffs, his head lowered, his face pale as if all the color had drained out with his courage. He muttered under his breath, fragments of guilt mixing with pills and paranoia. "I didn't mean to. I saw a threat. I saw—" Mace entered and sat across from him. Turning on the recorder, "Officer Callahan, you're under federal investigation for assaulting a retired Supreme Court justice. You have a right to counsel, but I suggest you start talking." Declan's eyes darted, sweat dripping from his temples. "You don't get it. Man, that kid from the school." He slammed his head against the table, leaving a red mark. "He was 9 years old. I froze. I shot too late. Graves told me to bury it, said it was the city's problem." His voice cracked, breaking into sobs. "I see him every night, every damn night." Mace let him speak, recording every word. "So you thought beating an old man would fix that?" Declan looked up, eyes hollow. "I thought it would make the noise stop." Mace leaned in. "That noise is your conscience. You'll live with it for 18 years. Declan blinked, stunned. "What?" "You just confessed," Mace said quietly. 18 years, minimum." Declan's head dropped onto his arms as he began to cry like a child who'd finally realized the monster wasn't under the bed. It was in his reflection. Upstairs, Captain Harlan Graves sat alone in his office, the air thick with the sour smell of whiskey and mold. He watched the chaos unfold through the blinds, agents collecting drives, detectives in handcuffs, local media swarming outside the gate. He picked up his phone, calling the one man he thought could save him, the governor. But the call went to voicemail. "Governor," he muttered, "it's Graves. I did what I was told. I kept this city clean. You told me to keep the quarter white. Don't you leave me in the dark now." The line clicked dead. He tried again. Same result. He stared at the wall where his Katrina medals hung beside photos of him rescuing children 2 decades earlier. "I was a hero once," he whispered. "Now they'll say I'm a murderer." Downstairs, Reyna's statement played over the loudspeaker as agents reviewed footage. Graves' voice echoed from one of the files. "Clear the street before VIPs exit. Keep the quarter white." Another file showed body cam footage from that night, Declan laughing while blood dripped from Elijah's temple. The agents exchanged grim looks. One of them turned to Mace. "Sir, this isn't just local. This looks systemic." Mace nodded. It's always systemic. The question is who signs the checks. In the medical wing, Elijah sat on a cot, bandaged and calm. Amelie stood beside him, still in her soaked white coat. Exhaustion etched across her face. "They'll try to spin it," she said quietly. "Say it was a misunderstanding." Elijah smiled faintly. "Let them. The truth doesn't need defense. It just needs daylight." She took his hand. "You could press charges personally." He shook his head. "This isn't about me. It's about the rot. You can't heal infection by treating the scar. You have to cut deep." The first news alert broke at 3:12 a.m. CNN flashed the headline, "Supreme Court Justice Assaulted by New Orleans Police. Federal Raid Underway." The accompanying video. Raina's body cam showed Declan kicking the bench, Elijah's blood hitting the pavement, and his quiet words, "You are making a grave mistake." Within 30 minutes, the clip hit 12 million views. Hashtags flooded every social feed. Protesters began gathering outside the precinct, holding signs that read, "Justice for Elijah" and "The bench still stands." Graves saw the footage on his office TV. His hand trembled as he reached for the bottle. "They'll never remember what I did back in 2005, he muttered. "Only how I fell." He poured the last of the bourbon, the amber liquid shaking in the glass. "I saved lives," he whispered, voice breaking. "I saved this damn city." He picked up his phone again and called his ex-wife. "Linda." She answered after 3 rings, voice tired and cold. "Harlan, it's 3 in the morning. "Linda," he said softly. "They're coming for me." There was a pause. "I warned you," she said. "You kept covering for those men." "I did what I had to do," he shouted. "I'm not a bad man." "No," she said. "You just stopped being a good one." The line clicked off. Graves sat in silence, tears cutting through the grime on his face. Downstairs, Mace was giving orders. "Seal the evidence. No one touches anything without my authorization." He turned to Raina. "Get some rest. You did enough for tonight." She shook her head. "Not until I call my daughter." She stepped outside, rain still falling hard, and dialed her number. A small, sleepy voice answered. "Mommy?" Raina's voice broke. "Hey, baby. Mommy did something good tonight. No more monsters. Okay?" The girl giggled softly. "Okay. Mommy." Raina wiped her tears, whispering, "I love you." In the interrogation room, Declan sat alone, staring at his blood-stained hands. "I didn't mean to kill him," he whispered, not realizing he'd already confessed to crimes beyond his memory. He slammed his head again against the table. "Make it stop. Make it stop." The guard outside closed the door quietly. Then came the final sound, one sharp, echoing gunshot from upstairs. The agents froze. Mace ran for the stairwell, Amelie right behind him. When they burst into Graves's office, the sight was biblical. The captain sat slumped behind his desk, service revolver still smoking, a dark pool spreading beneath the Katrina medal he'd once worn with pride. On the wall above him, the framed commendation for heroism during crisis was shattered. A bullet hole through the word honor. Mace lowered his head. "Get the coroner." As dawn approached, the storm began to fade. Reporters filled the courtyard. Federal vans idled by the curb. And inside, Elijah watched it all through the glass of the medical wing. Justice doesn't always roar, he murmured to Amelie. Sometimes it whispers through the wreckage. She squeezed his hand, eyes wet. "We're not done." He nodded. "No. The trial will finish what tonight began, and in the dim corridor. As the rain slowed and the city exhaled, a single truth lingered. The 8th District hadn't just lost a captain. It had lost the illusion that power could hide behind silence forever. 3 months later, New Orleans woke to a day that felt like judgment itself. The federal courthouse on Camp Street overflowed with cameras. protesters, and voices chanting justice for Elijah. Reporters swarmed the marble steps, their umbrellas battling the southern rain while the words Moreau v. State of Louisiana lit every major screen in America. Inside, the courtroom was packed, every seat filled with faces that carried history: black families, civil rights lawyers, off-duty nurses, veterans, teachers, even a few trembling officers who'd come to see if the law could still mean something. The tension was electric, the kind that could either heal a city or set it ablaze. Amélie Moreau took the stand first. Her voice was firm, her white coat pressed, though her eyes betrayed sleepless nights. She recounted the night her grandfather was assaulted, the phone call that changed her life, and the footage that every American had now seen. The screen behind her played the recording, Declan Callahan's laughter echoing as Elijah's blood dripped onto the pavement. "This isn't policing," she said, her voice trembling. "It's terror with a badge. My son, who's 6 years old and autistic, asks me why cops hate us. I had no answer until that night. Now I know. It's because silence is the easiest form of violence." The courtroom was still, except for the faint hum of cameras outside. Even the defense attorneys avoided her eyes. When she stepped down, Mace Delgado rose, his tone solemn. "The government calls Justice Elijah Moreau." The room held its breath as the old man approached the stand, his limp barely noticeable, his posture straight as a gavel. He took the oath, then looked across the courtroom at Declan Callahan, pale, hollow-eyed, his hands trembling in his lap. "Mr. Callahan," Elijah began, voice calm and deep, "you saw an old man on a bench and made yourself judge, jury, and executioner before you knew my name. You saw skin, not service. You saw age, not wisdom. You saw threat, not humanity." His eyes swept over the jury. "I've spent my life defending the law, but that night, I learned what it feels like to be on the wrong end of it. I offered identification. I spoke calmly. And yet, my head was split open on the curb outside a club I helped desegregate 50 years ago. That bench you destroyed was more than wood. It was memory, patience, and the burden of every black man who ever waited for justice that never came." He paused, letting the words settle. "They called it resisting arrest. I call it surviving history." Mace nodded to the bailiff. "Play Exhibit 47. The screens flickered, showing footage from Raina Boudreau's secret drive, years of abuse, cover-ups, racial slurs, unreported shootings. One clip showed Graves himself at a bar, laughing, saying, "Keep the quarter white. The mayor likes it clean." Gasps filled the room. A juror covered her mouth. Even the judge leaned forward, his knuckles whitening. Mace turned to the gallery. This wasn't a bad apple. This was the orchard. Then came Raina's turn. She took the stand with her uniform pressed but her voice trembling. "Captain Graves ordered us to keep certain streets clear. That meant black folks, tourists who looked out of place, anyone who didn't fit the image." She hesitated, then swallowed hard. "In 2019, I reported a rape by a fellow officer. Graves buried it, said it would ruin morale. I stayed quiet until the night Justice Moreau bled on my floor. That was the night I couldn't stay silent anymore." Her tears fell freely. "I was complicit. I won't pretend I wasn't. But I'm here because redemption doesn't erase the past. It starts it." Defense counsel tried to claw back ground, calling it a misunderstanding, an unfortunate escalation, a failure of communication. But the jury had seen too much. The truth wasn't hidden behind legalese. It was on the screen, in every drop of blood, in every officer's smirk. Declan finally took the stand, his voice barely above a whisper. "I had PTSD," he said, "from that school shooting in 2022. A kid died in my arms. I started seeing threats everywhere. Pills, nightmares, noise in my head I couldn't turn off. That night, When I saw him sitting there, I didn't see a man. I saw another threat. His voice cracked, tears streaming. But he wasn't. He was calm. He was right. And I ruined everything. Mace approached slowly. Officer Callahan, do you understand what you just admitted? Declan nodded weakly. That I let my fear turn into hate. Mace's voice softened. How many people did you hurt before this? Declan hesitated, then whispered, 15, maybe more. All black. Mace turned to the jury. Pattern and intent, case closed, by late afternoon. The courtroom lights dimmed as Judge William Thatcher prepared to read the verdict. His face was solemn, his voice even. This court finds Officer Declan Callahan guilty on all counts: assault, civil rights violation, obstruction of justice, and perjury. 18 years in federal prison, no parole, and a $2.1 million fine payable to civil rights victims' funds. The gavel struck once, sharp and final. Declan's head dropped, tears staining his jumpsuit. Sergeant Raina Boudreau, the judge continued, for complicity and obstruction, 15 years, reduced for cooperation and testimony. You will serve and teach inmate reform classes as part of rehabilitation. Raina nodded, whispering, Thank you. The room held its breath as the judge continued. The estate of Captain Harlan Graves, posthumously convicted of obstruction, will pay restitution of $2.1 million. 28 officers are terminated. 12 more face indictment. The crowd erupted. Applause, sobs, shouts of relief, all colliding into something sacred. Amelie rushed to her grandfather, tears streaming. We won, she whispered. Elijah smiled faintly. No, child. The people won. Cameras flashed, recording his tired but steady face as he stood and turned to the courtroom. Justice isn't revenge, he said. It's repair. The judge stood, bowing his head slightly. Justice Moreau, he said softly. You've reminded us what the law was meant to be outside. The rain had stopped. Reporters shouted questions. Will there be reform? What happens next? Elijah paused at the courthouse steps, the marble glowing under the streetlights. Reform begins with truth, he said, and truth always begins with accountability. That night, CNN, MSNBC, and even Fox ran the same headline. From the bench to the battlefield, the case that changed policing forever. The video of Elijah's final words went viral within hours. Federal oversight committees called emergency meetings. The Justice Department announced nationwide audits, and for the first time in decades, the people of New Orleans walked through Royal Street without fear of flashing lights behind them, back inside his hotel. Elijah sat by the window, cigar in hand, watching the city lights reflect off the Mississippi. Amelie entered quietly. They want you to speak in D.C., she said. He nodded, exhaling smoke. Let them wait. Tonight isn't about speeches. It's about silence, the kind that finally means peace. When she left, he opened his worn notebook and wrote 6 words on the final page. The bench rises again, forevermore. Then he closed it, placed it beside his gavel, and whispered into the night. The law has spoken. 6 months later. The 8th District Precinct stood empty, its red brick walls now a shell of ghosts. The windows were boarded up, the nameplate removed, and the faded lettering to protect and serve had been replaced by a small bronze plaque that read, Site of the Moreau Incident. Justice begins here. Reporters called it the quietest place in New Orleans, but those who had worked there still heard echoes. The laughter that once filled the locker room, the slamming of cells, the desperate cries of men who'd been ignored. Now, silence ruled, inside. What had been Captain Graves's office was converted into a memorial exhibit. The walls displayed photos of the victims, 47 faces, each with a date and case file number. At the center stood the old bench, scrubbed clean of blood, its wood scarred but unbroken. Beneath it, a small plaque read, "The bench endured." Visitors came daily, students, tourists, families, touching the bench like a relic of history. Elijah Moreau walked through the corridor alone that morning, cane tapping softly against the tiled floor. The air smelled of disinfectant and new paint, not corruption. The FBI had handed the precinct to a reform task force, and Elijah had come to see the change for himself. A young lieutenant met him at the door, no older than 30. "Sir, we're retraining the entire unit," he said nervously. "Every new recruit has to pass a de-escalation course and an ethics exam before they ever see the street." Elijah nodded slowly. "Good," he said. "Justice isn't built in a day. It's built in the dark, one honest act at a time." The lieutenant swallowed hard, almost emotional. "Sir, my father was arrested here in 2010. Wrong address. He died waiting for help. Seeing you here, it feels like something finally changed." Elijah smiled faintly. "It did. But only if you protect it. Across town." Amelie had turned her pain into purpose. With the help of federal grants and her grandfather's blessing, she launched the Bench Fund, a national nonprofit offering free medical and legal care to victims of police brutality and their families. In just 6 months, over 5,000 survivors received treatment, representation, or counseling. The program trained volunteer doctors, therapists, and civil rights attorneys from across the country. On opening day, Amelie stood before the press and said, "This fund exists because waiting on justice should never mean dying for it." Her young son, Nathan, now 7, sat in the front row holding a sketch he'd made of a wooden bench surrounded by sunlight. When she finished her speech, he ran up and handed it to Elijah. "For you, Grandpa," he said. "For all the waiting people." Elijah knelt, eyes glistening, and took the drawing. "You've given this bench a future," he whispered. Meanwhile, the purge continued. 28 officers had been fired. 12 fled the country, most caught in Mexico or Belize within weeks. Federal prosecutors uncovered a network of bribes tied to overtime scams, evidence tampering, and racial profiling quotas. What began as one assault case had turned into the largest internal purge in U.S. police history. Congress held hearings titled the Moreau Reform Inquiry. DOJ statistics showed a 47% drop in use of force cases across Louisiana. Other states followed: Illinois, California, New York, adopting AI-audited body cams and public transparency laws inspired by Elijah's case. What had started as a storm in one precinct became a national reckoning. But not everyone escaped the past. In Attica Correctional Facility, Sergeant Raina Boudreau spent her days in the library, teaching inmates how to read, file grievances, and study law. Her hair had grown silver, her posture straighter than ever. The other inmates called her the teacher. She refused interviews, refused pity. At night, she wrote apology letters to victims' families, to her daughter, even to Elijah. One of them read, "I was silent for too long. You reminded me that silence is a form of violence. I'm trying to live differently now, even here." Elijah received that letter months later, folded neatly inside a plain envelope. He kept it in his Bible beside a verse he'd always loved. "Justice rolls down like waters, and righteousness like a mighty stream." Declan Callahan. Meanwhile, labored on the prison work crew in Mississippi. The once arrogant cop was now a gaunt man with hollow eyes. Every night, he woke screaming, drenched in sweat, haunted by the faces of those he'd hurt. "I see your face. Justice," he'd mutter into the dark. "I see the bench." Guards said he'd built a small wooden stool from scraps in the carpentry shop and sat on it for hours in silence. Other inmates mocked him, calling him the preacher. but he never spoke back. He'd stopped asking for appeals. The prison psychologist wrote in her notes, "He's not serving time. He's living in it." Mace Delgado's world changed too. The case had made him a national figure, a federal prosecutor who became the face of reform. 6 months after the verdict, Chief Justice Ortiz personally pinned a civil rights medal on his lapel in D.C. Elijah's call saved more than one man. She told him, "It saved the soul of justice." Mace stood before the press and said, "The law can't heal the wound it caused until it admits the wound exists." The next day, the president signed a federal order expanding the AI auditing system nationwide, calling it the Moreau Act in practice, back in New Orleans. Elijah spent his days quietly. He'd declined television interviews and refused every political offer. "I'm not running for anything," he told them. "I'm resting for something." Most mornings. He returned to Royal Street and sat on the restored bench outside the Crescent Club. The same place it all began. The air smelled of coffee and brass polish. A saxophone played faintly from inside. Tourists often stopped to thank him, some asking for photos, others simply sitting beside him in silence. Once, a young officer approached nervously, hat in hand. "Sir, my academy instructor made us study your case, said you taught us more about restraint than any manual ever could." Elijah looked up, smiled kindly. "Restraint isn't weakness. Son, it's power under control." The officer nodded. "Thank you." "Sir." As the sun dipped below the quarter, Amelie joined her grandfather on the bench, her white coat folded neatly in her lap. "They're calling this the biggest police purge in U.S. history," she said softly. 28 fired, 12 indicted, 47 victims named." Elijah chuckled. "Numbers don't impress me. Change does." She looked at him with pride. "It's happening. Slowly. But it's happening." He nodded. "Justice moves like an old train. It's loud. It's slow. But it gets there." Before they left, Elijah looked at the bench one last time. He traced his hand over the scar in the wood, where his blood had once stained it. "Heroes fall hardest when truth shines." He murmured. Amelie squeezed his hand. "But they still fall with dignity." He smiled faintly, then let the fall stand as a lesson. By nightfall, the Crescent Club came alive again with music, soft jazz floating into the street, mingling with laughter and the hum of the quarter. For the first time in years, people of every color sat together on Royal Street without fear. The bench, once a scene of violence, had become a gathering place. Some said if you sat there long enough, you could still hear Elijah's voice carried through the night air. Calm and steady, the bench stands for all who waited. Now, it waits no more, and somewhere deep in the heart of the city, in the quiet between the notes of a saxophone, justice exhaled, for once, not as an ideal, but as a living truth. 1 year later, Washington, D.C. stood still beneath a pale spring sky as 5,000 people gathered on the marble steps of the Supreme Court. The banners waved softly in the wind. The Moreau Act. 1 year of reform. It was not a rally. It was a reckoning. From civil rights leaders to police chiefs, from college students to senators. The crowd carried one shared understanding. The night an old man bled on a bench had changed the country. Federal agents lined the perimeter. Cameras rolled, and a quiet hum filled the air. Then the doors of the court opened, and Justice Elijah Moreau stepped out with a cane in one hand and a folded speech in the other. He was 79 now, his gait slower, but his voice still carried that same thunder wrapped in silk. As he approached the podium, the crowd rose to its feet, the applause rolling like waves against the marble columns. He waited for silence, looking out at the sea of faces, his eyes glinting behind gold-rimmed glasses. They thought a bench was just wood. he began, his baritone calm and steady. But a bench is where justice sits. It's where truth waits. That night. It waited for me. Now. It waits for all of you. The crowd listened as he spoke without notes. Every pause deliberate, every sentence heavy with meaning. For too long. Justice was a privilege of the powerful. The Moreau Act didn't fix the system. It revealed it. It forced cameras to see what eyes refused to. It made silence impossible. And that, my friends, is how change begins. Not with a riot, not with rage, but with truth. He gestured toward the front row, where Chief Justice Valeria Ortiz, AUSA Marcus Delgado, and Dr. Amelie Moreau sat together. These people stood when others hid. They broke their own to rebuild the whole. They didn't save me. They saved what I believed in. His voice wavered slightly, but his conviction only grew. To every officer who serves with honor, to every citizen who demands fairness, to every child who asks why the law doesn't love them back, remember this: justice is not blind, it's watching who we become when no one's looking. When he finished. The silence that followed was almost sacred. Then the applause erupted again, long, relentless, unbroken. Ortiz rose first, tears streaming, and embraced him. "You saved me twice," she whispered, "once at Harvard, and once for the nation." He smiled faintly. "You did the saving. Val, I just gave you a reason." Cameras captured that image. The old judge and the sitting Chief Justice locked in a quiet, tearful embrace, as the symbol of a new era behind them. A banner unfurled on the court steps, the Moreau Act, truth in every frame. Later that afternoon, Congress met in a joint session to mark the official anniversary. Lawmakers from both parties stood to vote on the expansion of the act, mandatory AI-audited body cameras in all 50 states, penalties up to $5 million per violation, and federal grants for community-led review boards. The bill passed unanimously, an event unheard of in modern politics. The next morning, headlines read, "From blood to law, the Moreau legacy passes," while Washington celebrated. Amelie Moreau returned to New Orleans to open a new wing of Tulane Medical Center, the Bench Clinic. Its purpose was revolutionary, not for victims, but for the families of former officers. Inside, children of dismissed cops received counseling, tutoring, and addiction recovery programs. "You heal the wound," Amelie said at the opening, "not by punishing pain, but by understanding where it came from." Even the city's new police chief, a black woman named Patrice Landry, attended the ribbon-cutting. "Doctor," she told Amelie, "your clinic is saving more lives than any badge ever could." Meanwhile, Mace Delgado was promoted to director of the DOJ Civil Rights Division in his first public address. He held up Elijah's photo and said, "The law isn't a hammer, it's a light. We don't strike with it, we illuminate with it." His words spread through universities and police academies nationwide. Every new recruit in the country was now required to study the Moreau case as part of ethical training. One line from Elijah's testimony became a printed oath. "See humanity first, authority second." And so, the old man's name, once whispered in outrage, became synonymous with reform. City after city began renaming courthouse benches, parks, and scholarship funds in his honor. The most symbolic of all stood outside the rebuilt 8th District Precinct in New Orleans. A bronze bench, cast from the wood of the original, gleamed beneath a magnolia tree. The plaque read, "In memory of those who waited, Justice Elijah Moreau." Tourists stopped to take pictures, children climbed it, and elders sat quietly, remembering on weekends. Jazz musicians gathered near the sidewalk, playing "Do You Know What It Means to Miss New Orleans," the song Elijah had heard that fateful night in April. Elijah returned home to Royal Street for the first time in months. The Crescent Club had reopened under new ownership. now a quiet jazz cafe that donated a portion of its revenue to the bench fund. He sat outside on the original bench, its wood restored, cigar in hand. The city around him had changed. Police cars now carried cameras on every panel. Citizens could access footage publicly, and misconduct reports appeared online in real time. For the first time in decades, black families walked through the quarter without flinching at flashing lights. The storm passed. Elijah murmured, lighting his cigar. The legacy endures. Amelie joined him as dusk painted the street gold. Nathan ran ahead, laughing, chasing pigeons, his little voice echoing against the cobblestones. "Grandpa, they put your name on TV again." Elijah chuckled softly. "They always do when they run out of news." "They said you made the lawfare," the boy said, climbing into his lap. "Did you?" Elijah looked out at the horizon. "I tried. Son, the rest is up to you." As night settled, saxophones hummed from inside the club, blending with laughter and the steady rhythm of passing footsteps. People from every corner of the city gathered along the street, some recognizing him, some not. It didn't matter. The work had outlived the worker. The bench had outlasted the wound. When Amelie rose to leave, she kissed his cheek. "You did it." "Grandpa," he smiled, the cigar smoke curling in the cool air. "No, child," he said softly. "We did it. Together." At 8:42 p.m., the last photograph of Elijah Moreau was taken. A candid shot of him sitting on the bench, his grandson's arms around his neck, the lights of the Crescent Club glowing behind him. It went viral by morning, captioned by a journalist who'd followed his case since the beginning. He waited for justice. Now justice waits for us. Weeks later, Elijah passed peacefully in his sleep, the cigar still resting in the ashtray beside his chair. His funeral drew thousands. Judges, officers, mothers, and children lined up outside the courthouse, holding white roses and small wooden carvings of benches. Chief Justice Ortiz delivered the eulogy. He taught us that justice is not a courtroom. It's a choice we make every day. Mace Delgado placed his badge on the casket. "For the man who reminded us why law exists." And Amelie, holding Nathan close, whispered, "The bench is forever." As the procession ended, the crowd began to hum softly, one familiar tune rising from the thousands. "Do you know what it means to miss New Orleans?" The song carried through the city, over the river, through the quarter, past the Crescent Club, and finally down Royal Street, where the bronze bench gleamed beneath the magnolia tree. The plaque caught the morning light, and beneath it, someone had placed a small handwritten note that read, "Storm past, legacy eternal. Thank you for watching and for standing with stories that honor truth, justice, and humanity." If this story moved you, please take a moment to subscribe, like, and share it so more people can hear voices that inspire change.